So my advice to you is just browse on YouTube. There are lots of videos in how these companies have developed good practices. So these are things that the companies practice to have good governance practices. CSR activities, supplier management, and everything is the fundamental is how it is the company is being controlled and directed to practice good practices. Well, there's another question, but focusing on all stakeholders is costly. Obviously, it is costly. Doing CSR is also costly. Some companies say doing CSR is costly, but yet again, what we can say is even though it is a cost, it can outweigh the benefits that would give to you. If you have good CSR, if you are good to your customers or all the stakeholders, you don't have to worry about your share price. If you do bad, if you are not looking out your stakeholders, then obviously it would be reflected in your share price. It would go down. It has a cost. I'm not saying no. Corporate governance is costly. Having good practices is costly. But cost benefits outweigh the benefits. Benefits outweigh the cost. Benefit is more. That's why some companies practice governance practices. Some companies do not. However, those who practice good governance practices, there are lots of scholarly research with the link of corporate governance and company performance. ගොඩක් research තියෙනවා company performance and corporate governance දෙක link කරලා. Read those research. Most of the conclusion has been if you have good governance practices, performance is good, positive relationship. So you can do even in Sri Lanka with the data available data, you can also do that. Sri Lankan studies are there. So we should not always think about the cost. Everything is costly, but if the benefit is more than that, it's worth to take a chance. So let's move forward. Now the definitions those are the definitions. There are lots of definitions, but the basic definitions are those. So based on these definitions, I can derive, we can derive the pillars. I told you all these definitions are built on these pillars. When the pillars මත තමයි මේ definitions හැම එකම ඇදිලා තියෙන්නේ. So we have to study those pillars in detail. So let's see what those pillars are before talking in detail. Most of this we have already discussed. Accountability, transparency, fairness, and independence. So all the definitions, if we take as what is corporate governance, is you can give any sort of definition based on these four pillars. මේ pillars හතර මත ගොඩනැගිච්ච ඕනම definition එකක් we can say corporate governance. So what is accountability? What is accountability? Reporting what has done. Accountability is simply, now there are two parties involved. We have the board, shareholder, and the management. Shareholder appoint the board, board appoint the management. So management is accountable to the board, and the board is accountable to shareholders. Two ways. Firstly, management is accountable to board. Board is accountable to shareholders. Why? Now, I repeat again. Board, what they have to do is they have to understand the aspiration of the shareholder and convert into business knowledge, convert it to business knowledge, and then management is running the business. So when you run the business, you have to report, you are accountable to the board. And the board is accountable to shareholders. They have to tell on the AGM what the company has done, why they have taken this decision. So that is accountability. So corporate governance is built on one pillar, accountability. Accountability of these central parties, shareholders, board, and the management. Then what is transparency? Transparency means we have to report, or it's not accountable, but it's without hiding things. You have to report everything timely and accurately, disclosure of all the material matters. Transparent. හංගගෙන වැඩ කරන්න බෑ. If it is good governance, you have to be transparent. You have to tell this is what happened so far, timely and accurately, and also it has to be complete of material matters. වැඩ කරන දේවල් දීලා වැඩක් නැහැ. Timely matters means not any matter, but rather every information that is material has to be disclosed. Confidentiality, now this is something like this. No? If everything is discussed, confidentiality will lose. That is, there's in the chat there is an argument like that. But here what we are telling is, board have to maintain transparency to the shareholders. shareholder කෙනෙක්ට කිව්වොත් එහෙම මට company accounts ටික check කරන්න ඕනි කියලා board එකට කියන්න බෑ, මට ඒක දෙන්න බෑ කියන එක. Shareholder has the right. You can't hide anything from me. හැමෝටම දෙනවයි කියන එක නෙමෙයි. Now if we take the annual report, there are certain things that is not being disclosed. That is what I said, material things have to be disclosed. But if anyone, say an owner, questions something, you cannot hide that. Shareholder තියෙන confidentiality එකක් නැති කරන්න කමක් විදිහක් නැහැ. Shareholder ඕන දෙයකට check කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්න ඕනේ. You have to build the confidence. That is what the transparency means. So in transparency, there are certain idea, like when you are putting information, it has to be accurate. When you are putting information to maintain transparency, it has to be accurate, complete. Incomplete when bad, full way no. You have to give full report. Instantaneous, that is quickly. Annual reports, accounting period එක අද ඉවර වෙනවා නම් තව මාස 3කින් දීලා හරියන්නේ නැහැ. Quickly. Instantaneous and unbiased. Transparency means that these are the principles of being transparent. It have to be accurate, complete, instantaneous and unbiased. Then the other pillar is fairness. What is fairness? Any suggestions? What do you mean by fairness? Treat equally, right? That is, now you see, we have different stakeholders. No, it's not just the shareholder, board and the management. There are lots of stakeholders. Fairness simply means protect stakeholder rights. protect people's right. මිනිස්සුන්ගේ තියෙන rights protect කරන්න ඕනේ. Treat all shareholders, including the minorities, equitably. Equitably ඒගොල්ලොන්ට maintain කරන්න ඕනේ. කියන්නේ අපි කිසි කෙනෙක්ට වෙනසක් කරන්න නැතුව. You have to maintain the equity between all the shareholders and the minorities. මෙයා minor කෙනෙක් නිසා මෙයාව සලකන්නේ එහෙම කියලා කියන්න බෑ. You have to treat everyone, if it is even it is minority, even though they are being impacted, if they are being impacted by the company's operation, you have to consider them. You have to protect their rights. That is what it means. Now you will see, now since we have lots of stakeholders, again there is the best thing is to recognize the most important stakeholder groups. Likewise, what I have mentioned like earlier, Mendelov matrix. Using this kind of matrix, we can recognize the stakeholder groups and do a proper fairness to the interested parties. Fairness. If it is the board, every one member in the board has to be treated equally. එක board member කෙනෙක්ට වැඩියෙන් තව board member කෙනෙක්ට අඩුවෙන් එහෙම බෑ. So you have to maintain equity. Equitably you have to treat all the shareholders. Now fairness, again, now it depends on how the companies, how the countries treat this pillar, depends on the situation, or rather country wise how they treat fairness is different. What I mean to say is, now Japanese countries, in Japan, the companies in Japan, they are more focused on employees. So in treating fairness, they give more focus to employees. But in Sri Lanka, do we give more focus to employees? No. Mostly in AGM, what we talk about is the shareholders. අපි shareholders ලගන තමයි ලංකාවේ කතා කරන්නේ. Not the customers or the suppliers. So treatment of fairness can be different from country context and also the prevailing laws in the company, in the country. Prevailing laws in the country. Country එකේ තියෙන law එක අනුව, ඒ culture එක අනුව, company එකේ තියෙන context එක අනුව මේ fairness කියන pillar එක corporate governance එක treat වෙන විදිය වෙනස්. කිව්වා වගේ Japanese companies ගොඩක් focus කරන්නේ employees. That's why they give employee citizenship. Employee citizenship means when you recruit, there's only one job for one employee. අපි වගේ තැන් වලට මාරු වෙන්නේ නැහැ ලංකාවේ වගේ. එයා පටන් ගන්නෙ එකම company එකේ, එයා ඒ company එකෙම තමයි retire වෙන්නේ. Employee citizenship. They give a lot more focus to employees. So treating fairness can be different from the context, from the culture, or even the laws prevailing in that particular country. Then independence. What is independence is, now the freedom to do the work, not being influenced by anyone else. To have a good governance practice, you have to have this independence pillar. Now we know there are certain. So independence means not being influenced by anyone. If the board is given a certain task, they have to have that independence to do their activities. Shareholders cannot interfere unnecessarily. That is what it means. To have good governance, you have to have independence. Now, if we take different parties, owners, their objective is to maximize wealth. Employees, what they want is to maximize their welfare. Managers, what they want is to enhance their own wealth. So all of these are conflicting interests. So it's very likely that the decision making independence would be violated hence. shareholder ඕනේ යාගේ wealth එක maximize කරන්න. employee ඕනේ යාගේ welfare එක maximize කරගන්න. නිසා අපි decision එක ගන්නකොට වෙන කෙනෙක්ගෙන් තියෙන බලපෑම වැඩි. මොකද අපි අතර තියෙන conflicting ideas. So how do you maintain independence is one way is through auditors. Auditors, by getting auditors, external auditors, we can maintain independence. And another way that we see is independent directors. On the director board, we have executive and independent directors, non-executive directors, non-executive independent directors, executive directors. Non-executive independent directors are not involved in the company's activity. ඒගොල්ලෝ company activities වලට බලපෑමක් කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලෝ outside parties ලා. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඇවිල්ලා කරන්නේ independently ඒගොල්ලෝ decision එක දෙන්න. That is how independence is maintained inside the company. Independence means again not being influenced by anyone. You have to have the freedom to make decisions. Why? Because we have conflicting interests. So to avoid these conflicts, we can practice independence. One way is external auditor. Practically we see that. And another way is independent directors. From outside parties, we can call them to professionals. Outside professionals, we can ask them to come and sit in the board. Board එක ඇවිල්ලා වාඩි වෙන්න. ඇවිල්ලා අපිට independently මේකට bias නැතුව independent decision making කරන්න. Then there's no biasness. That is how companies can maintain or practice independence. So any questions with this? So far what we learned is, we learned the definitions in details. If you take word by word, there are meaning to each and every definitions. Why those definitions are in place. And overall definition we learned. And we learned the definition is said by Senior Professor Disabanda. So this overall definitions you see, it touched all the aspects, all the perspectives of different definitions of corporate governance. And from these definitions, we can derive these 4 pillars. So if you thoroughly look at this, all the definitions are set, built on these 4 pillars: accountability, transparency, fairness, and independence. Any questions up to this level? Yes, that's a good question. Madam, if any one of the pillars is not achieved, will the company face the effects of bad corporate governance? Exactly. If you are not maintaining transparency, can you say that company is a good company? If they are giving you fraud accounts, like what you saw in Enron company on the video that I showed, everything is there, accountability is there, fairness is there, independence is there, but transparency is not there, then you can't say corporate governance is there. Is corporate governance. If the fairness is not there, you are getting a good return, board is accountable, independence is there, but you are not treating your stakeholders equally. You are discriminating customers, you are discriminating suppliers, then you will have a bad word of mouth of your company ගැන වැරදි කියන. So to have good corporate governance, you have to have practice all these 4 pillars. මේ pillars 4ම තියෙනවා. If one pillar broke, then you can't say you have good corporate governance. Governance practices are built upon these 4 pillars. Any questions? Can you communicate it to me, please? So if you do not have questions up to this point, we can stop the class today and we'll continue this slide set next week. Okay, then thank you. So next day also we'll start the class at 5:30.